Girivaradari. Jaya Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradari. Yashodanandana Vajajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Yamunatira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabihari. Jaya Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradari. Jaya Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradari. Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Yamunatira Vanachari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Pralanisima, 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 Jaya Pralanisimha. Jaya Lakshmi Nisima, Lakshmi Nisima, Lakshmi Nisima, Jaya Lakshmi Nisima. Haribol, 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 Nitai Gora, Haribol. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Nitai Gora Premanandi. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, so today we're reading from Bhagavad Gita, and we're reading, is fourth chapter text 1 on the board? Okay, good. So that's the verse we're going to read today. The invocation actually that we chant in the beginning, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, it's a mantra that is also an offering for the Supreme Personality of Godhead inside of our heart. So when Dhruva Maharaj was meditating on the Paramatma inside of his heart, and he was instructed, I believe, by Narada Muni to chant this specific mantra. So it's an invocation of auspiciousness and of really feeling the presence of the Lord inside of our heart. Is everything? Oh, that's the situation, so I should just not touch the mic?
No, I don't know. We have been having some
technical situation. Okay, no problem. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Imam Vivasvate Yogam Proktavan Ahamafyayam Vivasvan Manave Praha Manur Ikshvakave Pravit Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Imam Vivasvate Yogam Proktavan Ahamafyayam Vivasvan Manave Praha Manur Ikshvakave Pravit Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Imam Vivasvate Yogam Proktavan Ahamafyayam Vivasvan Manave Praha Manur Ikshvakave Pravit. Please chant.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Imam Vivasvate Yogam Imam Vivasvate Yogam Bhoktavanam Avyayam Vivasvan Manavitaha Vivasvan
Bhagavanu Vacham Yam Vivasvati Yogam Tavanam Avyayam Shri Bhagavanu Vacham
Imam Vivasvate Yogam Proktavanaham Avyayam Vivasvan Manavedraha Manur Ikshvaka Vedravit
Shri Bhagavanu Vacham Tavanam Avyayam Vivasvan Manahipava Manu Ikshvaka Vedravit Shri Bhagavanu Vacham Vivasvati Yogam Shri Bhagavanu Vacha. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, Imam this Vivasvate unto the Sun God. Yogam, the science of one's relationship to the Supreme. Proktavan, instructed. Aham, I. Avyayam, imperishable. Vivasvan, Vivasvan, the Sun God's name. Manave, unto the Father of mankind. Praha, told. Manu, the Father of mankind. Ikshvakave, unto King Ikshvaku. Apravit, said. Translation. The personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, said, I instructed this imperishable science of yoga to the sun god Vivasvan, and Vivasvan instructed it to Manu, the father of mankind, and Manu in turn instructed it to Ikshvaku. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Here we find the history of the Bhagavad Gita traced from a remote time when it was delivered to the royal order of all planets. Beginning from the sun planet. The kings of all planets are especially meant for the protection of the inhabitants, and therefore the royal order should understand the science of Bhagavad Gita in order to be able to rule the citizens and protect them from material bondage to lust. Human life is meant for cultivation of spiritual knowledge, in eternal relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the executive heads of all states and all planets are obliged to impart this lesson to the citizens by education, culture, and devotion. In other words, the executive heads of all states are intended to spread the science of Krishna consciousness so that the people may take advantage of this great science and pursue a successful path, utilizing the opportunity of the human form of life. In this millennium, the sun god is known as Vivasvan, the king of the sun, which is the origin of all planets within the solar system. In the Brahma Samhita, it is stated, let me worship, Lord Brahma said, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Govinda, who is the original person and under whose order the sun, which is the king of all planets, is assuming immense power and heat. The sun represents the eye of the Lord and traverses its orbit in obedience to his order. The sun is the king of the planets, and the sun god, at present of the name Vivasvan, rules the sun planet, which is controlling all other planets by supplying heat and light. He is rotating under the order of Krishna, and Lord Krishna originally made Vivasvan his first disciple to understand the science of Bhagavad Gita. The Gita is not therefore a speculative treatise for the insignificant mundane scholar, but it is a standard book of knowledge coming down from time immemorial. In the Mahabharata, we can trace out the history of the Gita as follows. In the beginning of the millennium known as Treta Yuga, the science of the relationship with the Supreme was delivered by Vivasvan to Manu. Manu, being the father of mankind, gave it to his son, Maharaj Ikshavaku, the king of this earth planet, and therefore forefather of the Raghu dynasty in which Lord Ramachandra appeared. Therefore, Bhagavad Gita existed in human society from the time of Maharaj Ikshavaku. At the present moment, we have just passed through 5,000 years of the Kali Yuga, which lasts 432,000 years. Before this, there was Trapa Yuga, 800,000 years. And before that, there was Treta Yuga, 1,200,000 years. Thus, some 200,005,000 years ago, Manu spoke the Bhagavad Gita to his disciple and son, Maharaj Ikshavaku, the king of this planet Earth. The age of the current Manu is calculated to last some 305,300,000 years, of which 120,400,000 have passed. Accepting that before the birth of Manu, the Gita was spoken by the Lord to his disciple, the sun god Vivasvan, a rough estimate is that the Gita was spoken at least 120,400,000 years ago, and in human society it has been extant for 2 million years. It was re-spoken by the Lord again to Arjuna about 5,000 years ago. That is a rough estimate of the history of the Gita according to the Gita itself and according to the version of the speaker, Lord Sri Krishna. It was spoken to the sun god Vivasvan because he is also a Kshatriya and is the father of all Kshatriyas who are descendants of the sun god or are the Surya Vamsa Kshatriyas. Because Bhagavad Gita is as good as the Vedas, being spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, this knowledge is aparusheya, superhuman. Since the Vedic instructions are accepted as they are without human interpretation, the Gita must therefore be accepted without mundane interpretation. The mundane wranglers may speculate on the Gita in their own ways, but that is not Bhagavad Gita as it is. Therefore, Bhagavad Gita has to be accepted as it is from the disciplic succession, and it is described herein that the Lord spoke to the sun god. The sun god spoke to his son Manu, and Manu spoke to his son Ikshavaku. Omakyanti mirandasya kyananjana shalakaya shakshu militam yena tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadada Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so this fourth chapter, it is a little bit explained how this knowledge, this transcendental knowledge, is passed down. Hare Krishna. And the interesting thing about transcendental knowledge compared to normal material knowledge is that it is not just a theoretical collection of information. When we read in the fourth chapter later on how the spiritual master passes knowledge on to his disciple, it is tattva darshinaha. So the spiritual master, the guru, sees the truth, and after he sees the truth, he passes it on to his disciple. And the speciality about this is that it's not just a transformation of words, but it is a transformation of realization. And that is the essence of our succession that we have. And it's not just in Bhagavatam, or it is also described in Bhagavatam, how Brahma was one of the first so-called Adi yogis that received that knowledge. So he was born on this lotus, and then he heard the words tapa. And when he heard the words tapa, he understood that he was meant to engage in meditation. So he engaged in that meditation, and the fruit of that meditation was a realization and vision of the spiritual kingdom. and also an understanding of his dharma, of what he was meant to do. Now, that is because when God spoke the word tapa, it was just not the alphabet, T-A-P-A. In that transcendental sound, there is a seed of an instruction that fructified in Lord Brahma's heart. So when we hear from teachers, when we hear from the Guru, then when we do that with our intellect or our mind, it is not the perfect level because it doesn't reach the level of the heart. It just is processed on the level of the mind. But when we want to realize spiritual knowledge, it has to be received with an open heart. If it's not received with an open heart, it's going to be a theory, and it's going to lead to fanaticism. It's going to lead to a very shallow practice. So many religious wars are because people read something in a so-called holy book, or a holy book actually, and then think they are the chosen ones, they are the special ones, and therefore they want to start a war or even kill others. But that is because it is not realized knowledge. Because if you realize God, if you realize that you are the soul, how are you going to kill others and start a war? It's impossible. It's not possible. It can only happen when you actually have not realized God. Only when you have not realized God, then you're going to start to fight with others about so many different things. Because someone who has actually realized God, they see that every living being is part of God. Not just as a metaphor, I don't know the English word. It's not symbolic, literally we are part of God. And this is very important to understand if we want to progress on the spiritual path. In fact, I'm going to read a statement from Srila Prabhupada where he speaks about this. So this is now 18th chapter, text 54. And Prabhupada says, without being one with the Supreme, the Absolute, one cannot render service unto Him. In an absolute conception, there is no difference between the served and the servitor, yet the distinction is there in a higher spiritual sense. So what does that mean? If we don't realize and understand our divine nature as the Atma, then anything else that we produce that comes from that will be very conditioned. It is going to be very, very conditioned. It's going to be very, very limited. But when we realize that we are part of God, that we are like a minute creator and He is the big creator, and that we have this eternal relationship and connection, then bhakti can actually start to awaken in us. And then we actually have something to offer to the Lord. If the Atma, if the soul is not awakened, then what are we going to offer Krishna? What are we going to offer Him? Like, He's the creator of everything. He owns everything. He knows everything. He's omnipresent. He's omniscient. What can we offer Him apart from our love? And our love can only awaken if we realize that we are more than this physical body. This is very, very important. So when in Bhagavad Gita, it's Jnaninas Tattvadarshinaha, in this chapter, in text 34, the Guru sees the truth. The Guru has realized the truth, and he imparts that realization on the disciple. He gives that realization on the disciple. You cannot just academically study the Bhagavad Gita and become self-realized. Therefore, this whole principle of Guru, teacher is so important. And it's also not a matter of just formally getting initiated into some tradition. It's an initiation of the heart. It's an inner connection in the heart. When that is cultivated, that seed that the Guru gives starts to grow, starts to manifest inside the heart. And therefore Prabhupada, he writes in this purport, if you go to Gita and you make an academic study, yeah, if you go to the Bhagavad Gita and you study Bhakti Shastri, are you now self-realized? It is very nice and it's very good to know where what is written in Bhagavad Gita, and it's very nice to know verses, and it's very nice to know the different types of yoga, but it's even more important to realize what you're reading. And how does this realization come? The Yoga Sutras, they give a very nice definition of yoga that is also confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita in the 6th chapter. They say, when the chitta becomes still, when the mind becomes still, then the Svarupa, the self, the natural self, the true self becomes revealed. And one abides in his own self-satisfaction. But the mind has to become still. So to control the mind, the goal of controlling the mind is that the mind goes in its natural state of peacefulness and serenity. The mind's natural state is sattva. See, the mind is just like water. Water can take different forms. Water can take the form of being frozen. It becomes very hard. Water can become waves in the ocean. Water can become very dirty. Right? When there are big waves in the ocean, the water becomes very trüb auf Deutsch, very unclear. You cannot see to the bottom. But when the sea becomes very calm, everything settles, and then you can see what's on the bottom. And the same is true for our mind. When our mind calms down, the mind is situated in the heart, then the self starts to emerge. We start to perceive ourself, the Atma. But when the mind is very active, we cannot realize the self. Therefore, you cannot understand Krishna by just intellectual understanding. Oh, Krishna is like this, Krishna is like that. I've read Bhagavatam, I know what he does, I know what he likes, I know what he doesn't like, I know how he likes to dress, I know what he likes to eat. Okay, but have you realized it? Have you perceived it? Have you seen it? You can never understand God with your mind. Krishna can only reveal himself to us. He can only reveal himself to us. There's nothing we can do to realize God. It's a matter of grace. And that grace is what Krishna speaks here. That grace, that disciplic succession is a succession of grace that is passed down. When that is broken, then the realization is not going to manifest. Then we start to speculate, then we start to manifest our own things. But when that flow of grace, of mercy is there, then the realization can come. Therefore, self-realization can happen by our own endeavor. But God realization cannot happen by our own endeavor. God realization can only be given. When Dhruva Maharaj was standing in the forest, meditating on one leg in this yogic posture, suddenly the Lord appeared in his heart, but he only appeared for a moment. Similarly, Narada Muni, when he realized God in his heart, he only saw him for a moment, and then the Lord was gone again. So you can meditate on the Lord in your heart, but it's grace that is going to give you tattva darshana, that is going to give you darshan of the Lord. You cannot do it by yourself. Self-realization, we can endeavor, we can meditate, we can do whatever it takes to calm our mind, and we can start to perceive the self. This is also described in Bhagavad Gita in the 6th chapter, text 20 to 23, where it's said that one's mind is completely restrained from material mental activities by the practice of yoga. The mental activities of the mind are not present. This perfection is characterized by one's ability to see the self by the pure mind, and to relish and rejoice in the self. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness, realized through transcendental senses. So when we engage in bhakti yoga, in the beginning, one of the things that we are trying to do is to find a way to calm the mind. Not forcefully necessarily, but by engaging ourselves in a natural way. When a tree is nourished by the roots, it will flourish very nicely. If you pour water on the leaves, the tree will not nourish, it will not flourish, it will not grow. The same is true for our human nature. Imagine it like this. Imagine you have the sunlight and you have clouds. You have dark clouds that just cover the entire sky. Shingadev Bhagavan Ki. Right? When they're monsoon clouds. Have you ever been in India? I'm sure. Maybe you've been there. You've seen monsoon clouds. Everything becomes dark. Like Krishna. You can't see anything. You can't see any sunlight. And it just rains and rains and rains and it doesn't stop. But when we look sometimes here in the sky, we also see white clouds, right? White clouds. And the sun is shining through a little bit. We perceive some sunlight. Yes or no? So the same is true for our mind. When our mind is clouded by very heavy dark clouds of tamas, of ignorance, where we're completely disconnected from ourselves, where we are depressed, suppressed, in denial, the self is not going to emerge at all. But Krishna says if we follow our Dharma, it's like white clouds. They still cover the self, but the sunlight starts to emerge. Do you get the point I'm trying to make? So you can live your life in an ardhamic way, by being a criminal, doing all kinds of nonsense. It's like dark clouds that cover the self. Therefore, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, if you walk the path of someone else, it's dangerous. Because these are the dark clouds that cover the self. But the sun rays are the self in this example. But when we follow our dharmic self, we still identify as a human, but it's like white clouds, light clouds, that allow some rays of the self to emerge. Therefore, Krishna says to Arjuna, don't go to the forest, don't run away from the battlefield, don't pretend to be a brahmana, go fight, do your dharma. Because that helps us in the process of self-realization. And then of course, when the sky is clear and the sun rays emerge, we also see the sun. And the sun is obviously Krishna. We are like the sun rays and Krishna is like the sun. We are qualitatively one with God, but the sun ray compared to the sun globe is insignificant. So, because otherwise, if we don't engage and start to experience our true self, and we don't understand then God is literally in our heart. Nishingadev, that is on the altar, he is also in our heart. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, not as a light. He is literally in his four-handed form in our heart. Can you imagine this? You carry this altar here with Nishingadev in your heart all the time, wherever you go. This is not a joke, this is real. Wherever you go to toilet, he's with you. You go to sleep, he's with you. You are eating, he's with you. Anything you do, the Lord is always with you. He knows everything, every single thought, everything you do. It's not like, okay, I'm the temple, I see Nishingadev, he sees me, and once I leave the temple room, he's not there. In fact, Bhagavatam makes a very harsh statement about that. Let me read that to you. That's in Canto 3, chapter 29, text 22. I hope you can digest this statement, but it's just from Bhagavatam, in Prabhupada's translation. It says, for one who worships the deity of Godhead in the temples, but does not know that the Supreme Lord, as Paramatma, is situated in every living entity's heart, he must be in ignorance and is compared to one who offers oblations into ashes. So tonight when we sit at the yajna and we see Krishna only on the altar and not in the heart of everyone, then it's like Ramananda sitting there and offering the butter into ashes with no fire. That is what Bhagavatam is saying. So Prabhupada describes here in the purport of this verse, if you only see God in your church, in your mosque, in your temple, but you don't perceive Him in your own heart, you don't perceive Him in all living beings' heart, then you are nonsense. Because that's why religions fight, invade other countries, kill each other. My path is the only path. We are the chosen ones. Like every religion has this. Our religion will dominate the entire world and everyone will be a Muslim. No, everyone will be a Hare Krishna. No, everyone will be a Christian. The golden age will be an age of God consciousness. That's what it's going to be. And if we are sectarian and if we are so narrow-minded that we don't strive for these realizations, then they are not going to be given. We need to be eager to experience what is given in Shastra. We need to be eager for that. We need to be greedy for that. A genuine desire in our heart that, my Lord, I want to experience this. I read the Hinus Minyata Dehi. I read I am the soul, not the body. I read, Krishna, that you are in my heart. But do we feel like that? When you walk around, do you feel you carry this altar here in your chest? Imagine you would take the small deity of Nishingadev, take it in your hands and carry it around wherever you go. Would you act in the same way? But the point is like, here's another beautiful thing. I didn't write this verse down, but in the 4th canto, here's now something very important. In the 4th canto, where Dhruva Maharaj is meditating on the Lord inside his heart, I believe, it is mentioned one should meditate on the Lord as always smiling upon us in the heart. So the Lord is always gracefully smiling upon us. That means He knows everything we do, everything, not just in this life, millions of lifetimes, but He's always smiling on us. Okay, so that means God does not judge us at all. He doesn't. He's always mercifully, gracefully ready to give Himself to us. Because when we are in that consciousness, oh, now I did something, I should be ashamed, where, let me take like a stick and beat myself so I can do some repentance. It's tamas, it's darkness. It's not going to help you. But to genuinely cry out to the Lord, my Lord, okay, I chose again your temporary energy, this material energy. It is very attractive. Why is it so attractive? Why is Maya so attractive sometimes? Because it's Krishna's energy. It comes from Krishna. We are not Christians that believe in hell and heaven and there's a devil. Everything comes from Krishna. So this material energy also comes from Krishna. Therefore, we may sometimes get attracted to that. But then we have to direct our attention to Krishna's higher and pure energy. My Lord, I want your love. I know that all these other things, they're like many zeros, and when I add you, there's a 1 in front. And that is what we need to aspire for, to really go for that love. And that is not something that, is reached. One day we wake up and we are pure devotees, or worse, we think we have to die. Like we are in a state of misery, suffering, frustration, until we finally die. And Krishna takes us back to His kingdom. But that's not what Bhagavatam is talking about. Ajamil, he chanted the name of the Lord when he was about to pass away and taken by the Yamadutas, but as far as I remember, he had to come back and realize the Lord in his heart, realize the Lord before he could actually enter into Vaikuntha. If we don't experience Vaikuntha here, then we're also not going to go to Vaikuntha. How is it possible? It's not like that. Like Prabhupada can give us mercy, will give us mercy, but the truth needs to be realized now, not when we are dead. This human body is specifically designed to realize God. When you are demigod in heaven, you don't have the same advantages that a human being has. Because when you're a demigod, when you're a sun god, you have to do your dharma, like you have to engage in that. The sun god cannot stop doing his dharma because then the sun, is not going to function anymore. The demigods have to do their dharma. They cannot, they have to follow that. We can do what Krishna says in 66, I mean. Because Krishna says something interesting. He says, Sava Dharma Parityaja. Sava Dharma Parityaja. This is very interesting, isn't it? All the Bhagavad Gita, he speaks about do your dharma, follow your dharma, these are the different types of dharma, and then he says, abandon all dharma. Is it a printing mistake? Shouldn't it say abandon all adharma? Why is he saying abandon all dharma? Why? Here's a question to you. But then why does he instruct Arjuna in the entire Bhagavad Gita?
Because it's a yajna and we get purified and illuminated by that. And this is the jumping plane.
Right. Beautiful, yes. So our dharma is important, but Krishna says in the end of Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna, you're my very dear friend. I have a little secret for you. Very little secret. Very important, special secret. You can forget about all of this and just give your heart to me. Just trust me and surrender your heart unto me. Like Krishna says in the 6th chapter, for one who sees me everywhere and in everything, for that person I'm never lost, nor is he ever lost to me. So that's the fast track. However, now is something important. There's a reason why Krishna speaks so much about Dharma in the Bhagavad Gita. Because Dharma protects us from bypassing our human nature. There's transcending our human nature and there's bypassing our human nature. I don't know the German word right now either. So bypassing means something like you're denying, you're escaping your human nature. Someone who has transcended the body and the mind, such a person is extremely present, extremely grounded, extremely aware of their body, their mind. They are very much aware of their entire human system. Someone who has bypassed their human nature, they are somewhere in a cloud, up here, somewhere there. In our words, sometimes we call it spaced out. So as devotees, we have to be careful that when we make progress on our spiritual path, it means that we become fully present in our human body. We fully become present in our human incarnation. When the soul awakens, the soul is extremely powerful. The soul is not some dirt under a rock. The soul is part and parcel of God. That means we start to shine. We start to awake. We start to experience God's power in our heart. So humility doesn't mean that we suppress ourselves. Humility means that we connect to the power, the source of all power. We plug ourselves in. Because when the self awakens in our heart, when we perceive it, it will reflect positively on all of our different areas of life. We become a better human being. We become more grounded. We become more accessible. We become more loving. We become more compassionate. But definitely don't close ourselves away from the world. That is not what Krishna is saying. When the self awakens, we start to see God everywhere and in everything. That is the highest God realization. The Kanishta Adhikari only sees Krishna on the altar. The Madhyama Adhikari sees God, starts to perceive God in the hearts of others, and the Uttama Adhikari sees God everywhere and in everything. And that is something we want to remember on this path of devotional service. That we find this balance between fulfilling our Dharma. But what is our Dharma? Our Dharma is that which brings us closer to the Lord. It's that activity which brings us closer to the Lord. It's that activity which brings us stability in our human form of life. Dharma means we do everything we can in our life so the mind can become still and peaceful and can focus on the Lord. When the mind becomes still, the self awakens, and the self is always connected to Krishna. We're always connected to God. Always. That connection is never broken. We can only always exist because we are connected to the Lord. And Dharma means to set up our life in such a way that this naturally can awaken. Therefore, if you have a very fiery nature, a very warrior-like nature like Arjuna, you have to fight. Because then when you fight, you release that energy and then you can focus on Krishna. If you're a Brahman, if you have this nature of a teacher, you want to study, you want to write, you want to engage in higher arts. If you're a Vaishya, you cannot tell a Vaishya, don't do business. The mind will become so restless and disturbed. But when a Vaishya, a business, an entrepreneur, when they engage in their Dharma, their mind becomes actually peaceful. An artist, when they engage in their art, they become peaceful. And when the mind becomes still, the self awakens. When the self awakens, then we can really engage in bhakti, because when the self awakens, then love in our heart awakens. And then we can offer that love to the Lord. Yeah, so these are some thoughts I wanted to share on this verse, that the Bhagavad Gita is very alive. The Bhagavatam is very alive. But when we just read the letters of an alphabet, then that is what it's going to reveal to us. Just knowledge, just information. But that knowledge becomes realization through meditation. The chanting of the holy names for us, by engaging in seva with our heart, then this truth can awaken. Okay, are there any questions or comments?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Prabhu, for this inspiring lecture. I wanted to ask, what is Dharma? It seems there are various aspects and facets.
What is Dharma? It's a question to speak about for many, many hours. But like I said, to make Dharma very simple is to engage in activities that are natural for us. They are just very, very natural for us. So we don't have to spend extra energy and extra endeavor for something that is unnatural for us. So Dharma means, because when you do what's natural for you, for example, a bee is going to produce honey. If you tell a bee to build a house, it's not going to, they build their own houses, but if you tell a bee to engage in human Dharma, it's of course not going to work. A bee is going to do her Dharma. She doesn't have a choice. But we as human beings, why we're so confused, is because we have so many choices, so many options. But if we just follow what is natural to us, and what is natural for us is what feels very light. It feels very light. It gives us energy. It's light. It gives us energy. It inspires us. And it awakens the self if we connect it to Krishna. Because if we start to think too much in these boxes, I've seen myself and others do that. Oh, am I Shudra? Am I Brahmana? Am I Kshatriya? Maybe I'm none of that. Just focus on what is natural for you. Sometimes when we are children, we naturally engage in our dharma. Our parents would tell stories what we did as a child. Some may build bow and arrow and start a fight. Others were more interested in knowledge and books. Some were artistic, dancing, singing. So, like when a child is born, the samskaras that cover the true human nature are not so strong yet, and it can give a good idea. So, but you know that you not follow your dharma when you, for example, get sick all the time, you lack energy, you lack inspiration, you are confused, you are constantly in a state of fear and depression. You're not following your dharma. But when you start to feel light, feel inspired, feel energy, your health is improved, like all these signs, these are signs that you are aligning with your dharma. And of course, for us devotees, most important is that all these activities that we engage in, that we do it as an offering to the Lord. I do this as an offering to you. Yeah. You're welcome. 1 point?
It was 1 point.
Oh, okay. Maybe. Okay.
Auf Deutsch, auf Englisch? Auf Englisch. I was seeing the verse at the end of the purport of this verse.
Which verse? The verse today?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was this part. Because Bhagavad Gita is as good as the Vedas, being spoken by the Supreme Personality of God, that this knowledge is apurusheya, superhuman. Yeah. And the Vedic instructions are accepted as they are, without human interpretation. The Gita must therefore be accepted without mundane interpretation. Yeah. So here Srila Prabhupada is saying that Bhagavad Gita is as good as the Vedas, and that's why we should be taken as authority. Yeah. I find it sometimes difficult because for me it was immediately, as I got the experience of hearing from the Vedas, immediately I felt that, yes, this is the truth. I mean, I can see how this, it's nothing else. But how to then preach or present it to people that are really a bit still very doubtful from the Vedas, and they have no natural capacity to take it as an authority.
I think when we share this knowledge, that what is most important is to focus on how Krishna wants to reveal himself to these people. Yeah? So, for example, no one becomes a devotee, in my opinion, by some philosophical realization, like speculation, but because our heart is touched. And if our heart doesn't remain touched, we will leave this path. So what is the essence of the Vedas? Krishna says it in the end of 1866. He says, just give yourself to me. Just love me, just trust me. When we imbibe this as a character, as a personality, then we can inspire others. Because then they will start to question, why is Brian so loving? Why is he so compassionate? Why is he so happy? Why is he so inspired? What are the pills that you're taking? I want to know. And then you can say, well, it is all from Bhagavad Gita. Because sometimes there can be a lot of, when we share spiritual knowledge, sometimes, I'm not saying it's the case here, but sometimes it can be a matter of, I know the truth and I give you the truth, and you should listen to the truth, and if you don't, then you're a fool and you don't deserve. Prabhupada said, one moon and not many stars. They're all ignorant. Our movement is not spreading because I guess there are few chosen ones, like myself. So that's ego. So therefore, a yogi realizes this knowledge. And when you realize this knowledge, then you can present it to others nicely. Bhagavad Gita as it is doesn't mean to just copy-paste every single sentence of Prabhupada, copy it and paste it, and copy it and paste it. It means that you are aware, and Prabhupada, he made a beautiful statement about that a preacher has to be aware about time, place, and circumstance. For example, how you share spiritual knowledge in the Middle East is going to be different than doing it in Russia, than in America, than in South America. Different culture, different people. But the essence is to love God. That is the essence. That is the essence of the Vedas. So if we get caught up with some unnecessary detail, to dress in a certain way, to speak in a certain way, to think in a certain way, and we don't see the essence to love God and to love every living being, then we cannot spread this movement. If we fight amongst each other, how we should dress, who can be a guru, who can do this, who can do that, then we see what happens. Then the temples are empty. But when we start to imbibe that love in our heart, when we actually start to experience bhakti, and we start to share it with others because we are inspired, because our heart is open, then it becomes a natural relationship and interaction with the Lord. Because when you start to see the Lord in someone's heart, then the Lord will reveal to you in your own heart how you can share this message with them. Go for it. No, why not? Blow the concha, it's very auspicious. Then Nishingadev will be very happy. Nitai Gaur Premanandi. Gaura Bhakta Vindaki. Jaya Jaya